Everyone, it's Jen again. Hope you're having a good week going into the middle of December. Right now, I'm kind of looking at my goals for the next deadline that I made for myself, which was to rework Villain's Heart with the new systems. Originally, I didn't think that I was going to spend much time on this revision because my main goal was to just implement the object classes and the different scripts to update the battle system to accommodate like the skill triggers and the loyalty bonus announcements and the proper capitalization and reference to the units depending on what position they are, and just replacing a lot of those systems which are foundational enough that it's going to require a fresh install to play the new version. So I also wanted to go in and add enough changes to the story to improve it in certain places to make it worth the player's time to download the new version and possibly replay through it, maybe on a different route, just to see the changes that were made. And so it went from what I thought was going to be something that would be very easy to accomplish in like a week, which that's about how long it did take me to transfer over the new Arcane Dice War systems to the Villain's Heart, and with the shaders and stuff too. But then I had given myself basically like 3 weeks, so I did a little bit of a sprite update for the close-ups and the bond conversations so it would match the new bonding sprites a little bit more closely. I've decided to rework the pendant giving scenes to be a little bit more in line with the established lore that I polished up a little bit in Arcane Dice Wars. So when I initially was giving the pendants in the original version of Villain's Heart, I didn't have the whole crafting system in Arcane Dice Wars figured out and created, so the pendants were not like element and faction specific, so I'm going to be putting in that change as well as kind of making the whole proposal a little bit more formal, since it was made such a big deal in Arcane Dice Wars with like going to the flower fields. So we're going to do something like that too in Arcane Dice Wars Villain's Heart, where they're going to move from being in the meeting room to the courtyard, which I already have a background established for that. So that whole scene will be extended a little bit more with new artwork. And then I found myself kind of with still a week left and about 15 pages of suggestions from my playtester and copy editor. So the suggestions were all good suggestions, things that I would like to implement that were fair enough. This is the time for Michaelis, Jeth, and Dieta and Mieta to a certain extent to kind of really shine as far as like understanding their characters, their backgrounds, and the perspective of the crown a little bit more. So a lot of the suggestions were focused around those characters and understanding the kind of political situation of the world from the perspective of the crown, fleshing out that side more. As well as exploring some of the darker undertones that are not as emphasized in Arcane Dice Wars, being that main game is a little bit more lighthearted. Even the final war, the consequences of the final war are more extreme than the consequences of like Villain's Heart. So Villain's Heart, they're having like a tax dispute, and that's what they're going to war over. And in Arcane Dice Wars, it's more like the fate and future of the world sustainability, right? So so much of that like kind of reflects like how I see a lot of like the way I guess civilization deals with conflict and like problems in general too. It's like these big existential problems that have like long-term effects but unfold very slowly. and could the complete ramifications won't appear until generations to come. Well, we're just gonna kind of like not make a big deal out of that. Most of us are gonna like put our heads in the sand. But like when it comes to like tax returns or tax evasion or money, like right now money, we're gonna make a big deal out of that, and we're gonna take that very personally. So I guess the way that that the people kind of deal with those conflicts in some way, the larger scale existential conflict, is what brings humanity together more. And even though the conflict in Arcane Dice Wars is more overall, in some ways like more substantial or grave, the parties involved, there's not so much what's the word? They're able to kind of see each other's perspectives a little bit more. It's not so divisive. Their opponents are not so heavily villainized, as opposed to in Villain's Heart, the conflict is in comparison rather petty, and yet maybe because, in my mind, because it's so petty, the people involved act very petty. They vilify their opponent. They are not willing to compromise. They're not willing to step back and recognize each other's humanity. They would rather like die on that hill, so to speak. So I wanted to focus my notes, like the suggestions I was given. I was having trouble. Let me back up for a moment. I was having trouble deciding on what I wanted to focus on for the revisions, because I could just go in and revise it indefinitely, like any piece of art. It's never going to reach perfection. There's always going to be things that can be polished and changed and improved, and as I grow as a person and as an artist, and my views and my techniques mature or change over the course of years, I'm always going to be able to go back and like say, oh, I'm going to fix that, I'm going to fix this. So number one, going into this revision period, I need to give myself a very strict deadline, because I do not want to spend more time on making revisions than a set amount of time, or else I could, like I say, be at it forever. So having a set deadline is very important to me in order to keep the revisions within a reasonable scope and hold myself accountable so that I can like move on to finishing Arcane Dice Wars and to a new project that's been cooking in the back of my mind. And then the other thing is trying to focus on what makes Villain's Heart, what makes it different from Arcane Dice Wars. Someday I'll probably go back and revise Arcane Dice Wars and polish it and add a little bit here and there that maybe I cut corners on the initial time around, because I was trying to make deadlines then, and I was maybe in hindsight I was like, oh well, this part of the story kind of could use a little bit more clarification or fleshing out, or is a bit contradictory compared to XYZ. So that's my that would be like the number one priority, is if there's contradictions, like in the case of like the pendant scenes, there's some contradictions to establish lore that I make in Arcane Dice Wars. So that's the number one fix. Number two in priority is emphasizing what makes Villain's Heart. So fleshing out, especially Michaelis's story, I want to work on, and how I'm going to go about adding some more content to the Crown side is going to be focusing on the dream sequences, the nightmare sequences, which are distinct from the original Arcane Dice Wars, because it's kind of like the God's way of trying to caution the player. And so I'm going to be expanding and changing around the dream sequences a lot to kind of put that sense of a bit of worry or intrepidation into this story. And it'll also give me an opportunity to explore the backstory is a little bit more of the main love interests, since they don't really open up about their past. This is a kind of fantasy world where the people are not accustomed to like modern psychology. They're not looking to explore their childhood traumas with some outsider. So that would be the only kind of rational way that I could let the player know about their inner psyche in a way that would seem like plausible. Because a lot of how they think and why they think, they're not super conscious of themselves, so why would they offer up that in a conversation? So I'm going to be focusing on the dream sequences, and then I will also be expanding on the prisoner scenes, because again, it kind of emphasizes the whole diversiveness of the cast, of the conflict, that isn't so much in Arcane Dice Wars, because I think even in the Crown side, where the old ones are more like villainized, than the old ones don't really villainize the Crown at all. They're just kind of like, yeah, we understand why they're doing what they're doing. That's cool. Then they the best person win. Versus the Crown side, even they are having trouble totally vilifying the old ones, in part because of how the old ones are pretty open-minded and not divisive the way they think of the people in the world and the conflict. So unlike them in Villain's Heart, the stakes as far as like where the mentality behind the war and the mentality of the Crown and Brookhaven against their opponents is not so forgiving or empathetic or understanding. They do not share a sense of shared humanity, and they don't extend any understanding to their opponents. So I want to expand those prisoner scenes to more heavily emphasize how both dehumanized the victors are towards their the losing side, and vice versa. So that will be a heavier and kind of darker theme that's explored in Villain's Heart as well. It doesn't sound like a lot on paper when I look at my to-do sheet. It seems pretty focused, but I think that will keep me pretty darn busy for this upcoming week, because I am going to be planning on implementing some more new art, and as well as rewriting a lot of the scenarios. And I have to still go through and like play test the whole thing too, to make sure that the new systems are working without any hitch, because I haven't actually done that yet. The farthest I've gotten was just basically like, oh, I did a lint run and it came back clean and my game's launching and appears to be functioning as it should be. So I think there's a lot of like little things that I'm going to find that are not quite right along the way, as far as like the mission class system being implemented and stuff. So should be busy this upcoming week, and I'm looking forward to that. I feel much more focused now with what I'm going to be, I guess, the handful of things that I'm going to be concentrating on, and using those as opportunities to implement some of the suggestions as far as like exploring certain characters and scenarios more. I'm going to do it through those particular events, and that will make the whole revision process more manageable. Hope you're all having a good December, enjoying your holiday season, staying warm, and you're working on something. Don't forget to enjoy the process. Let's have a great week going forward. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.